open session. Thank you. book, I go down the list and I don't forget them. Yeah, I know. Okay, good morning, everybody. Is that on? This meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority will come to order. We've emerged from closed session. We have nothing to report from the closed session. And we will start by asking the Secretary to please call the roll. Where is the Secretary?
Vice Chair Richards.
Okay. Go ahead.
Vice Chair Hartnett.
Here.
Mr. Umberg. Mr. Rossi.
Here.
Ms. Shank. Here. Ms. Perez Estelano. Here. Mr. Henning. Here. Chairman Richard.
Here. I'll ask Vice Chair Richards to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we go to the public comment period, I would just like to remark on one thing, and that is that Governor Brown, in his wisdom, yesterday reappointed Tom Richards to this body. And I think I can speak for all of my colleagues in saying that we're delighted that Tom is going to continue with us. He is a stalwart of his community. He represents the Central Valley, which is, of course, the first place that we are commencing construction of high-speed rail. He spends innumerable hours meeting with people and trying to gather information and provide information on the project. And he's just an all-around terrific human being that I've just been privileged to get to know. So I'd like to congratulate Tom and welcome him back to the board. With that, we'll turn to public comment. We'll turn to public comment now, and we'll start. This is going to be a challenge because in low light, those of us of advanced age have a little difficulty. So, but we're very pleased to be joined again by the State Secretary of Transportation, Brian Kelly. And so, Secretary Kelly, thank you for coming before us today, and we'd like to recognize you first.
Thank you, Mr. Sorry. Is it catching up to me? I can't tell. Anyway. Can you hear me? How about if I do this?
Yeah, why don't you take the mic out? Okay.
Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to do a little Phil Donahue here. I guess I dated myself there. Sorry. Oprah, Dr. Phil, take your pick. Anyway. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and board members, for the opportunity to be here today. I just wanted to come over and spend a few moments talking about the importance and the implications of the governor's budget proposal that came out earlier in the week, or January 10th, the end of last week. And what it means for us in the transportation community, and of course for high-speed rail in particular. Governor's budget is really the reflection of very difficult decisions that have been made over the course of the last 5 years that finally brings fiscal stability to the state of California. Very difficult decisions, including cuts and years of some disinvestment in California, have gotten us to a place where our fiscal picture is stabilized. Voters of California became part of the solution, of course, with the passage of Prop 30 that helped bring additional revenue into the state coffers. And as a result, that plus a growing economy has us in a place where we can finally reinvest in California and its future. And one segment of the budget this year that is a great beneficiary of that reinvestment is transportation. I wanted to just come over and spend a few minutes talking about what's in the governor's budget proposal that matters so much to us. On balance, the budget provides new investment of $1.7 billion in the fiscal year, above our normal sort of revenue sources for transportation purposes. And I want to describe a little bit about what that includes. First, it enables us to repay loans that the general fund made from transportation accounts in the past. As we were struggling to balance the general fund in past years, we borrowed money from transportation loans, and this year a loan that is not otherwise due until 2021. The governor and his attack on what he calls the wall of debt is enabling us to bring forward that loan repayment, and that means $351 million we'll be able to put into projects around the state of California, including important rehabilitation and pavement maintenance projects on the highway system, a system that is 50 plus years old and in many cases exceeding its useful life. We have a core focus on preservation going forward, and this budget puts a good down payment on our ability to invest in the preservation of our highway system. There's $100 million out of that loan repayment that we're going to invest in improving the operations of the highway system by investing in what we call intelligent transportation systems, things like cameras and loop detectors and monitors and changeable message signs that help us operate, and ramp metering lights that help us operate the system to greater efficiency. We need to make sure that equipment is in good working order, and this investment will enable us to replace old equipment and ensure that our congested areas, particularly urban areas, are operating much more efficiently. We'll be bringing forward major rehabilitation projects in the state highway system that, again, are not scheduled to be addressed until some years out, and this year we'll spend 110 of the 351 on moving forward very important rehabilitation projects on the highway system. That's very, very welcome new investment here in our sector. There's also the final appropriation of Proposition 1B bonds. By way of a reminder for folks, Proposition 1B was the major transportation bond passed by the voters in 2006. Many of those programs have moved forward and developed, and much of the investment has been made to the streets. This year we're doing the final investment of what's called the PTMI SEA funds. Those are funds that are available to public transit operators up and down the state of California for important capital improvements to their systems. You will see in places like LEMTA in the Bay Area at BART, many of these dollars going for major rehabilitation efforts, including new rail cars, new bus cars, new light rail cars, things like that. It's a $793 million appropriation this year. It is the final appropriation of those bond funds, and we're happy to be in a place where we can put those dollars to the streets this year. $160 million for intercity rail services, improving the Amtrak services that operate the three core corridor systems up and down our state. And the bond bill also resulted because Caltrans and CTC have done a nice job of administering the program. There have been, and there continue to be this fiscal year, administrative savings from some of those accounts that will enable us to reinvest about $113 million into additional projects in some of the other 1B categories. So it's a very useful investment for us, putting the 1B dollars to the streets. And then finally, and importantly, I know for this board, and really I think for the future of California, recognizing that we do not now provide through the state any real alternative for travel between Northern and Southern California that does not involve the automobile. The governor has recommitted or doubled down, if you will, on his commitment to build the high-speed rail project and to make investments in connected systems at the regional and local level, both in the north and the south. And he's doing that by really mirroring the approach that was taken in 1A, which provided $9 billion for direct investment into developing the high-speed rail project and $950 million to invest in connector services or investments to ensure we have a seamless transition between high-speed and local commuter, regional, urban rail. This year, the governor is proposing to use cap and trade funds, a total of $300 million toward rail modernization. And rail modernization means that we continue what we did in 1A. $250 million of that would be for the core development, the continuation of the development of this important project, and $50 million just in the fiscal year would start to make its way to the streets for connected investments for our regional and local partners. Again, that's been a core element of the approach taken in 1A. It dovetails nicely into the approach you all have taken in developing this project through a blended approach and blended service, which requires investments both at the state level and at the local regional level, much like the Caltrain electrification project. And so, the governor really said it best at his press conference where he unveiled his budget about the importance of this project and providing alternatives between for viable mobility alternatives for travel between the northern and southern part of the state to the vehicle. He noted, and it's a rare governor, I think, who can note this and get it right, but that last year there was 331.8 billion vehicle miles traveled on California's roads, and we need to provide alternatives if we're going to achieve our safety, our mobility, and our sustainability objectives. This is the beginning of what we hope will be a continued long-term investment in this project from these funds. I think it's important to note that the cap and trade program is a broad program that attacks greenhouse gas emissions through multiple investments. In the fiscal year, it's an $850 million program. Only 29% of that is being dedicated to this particular project and to rail modernization. But that's an important structure going to set the tone for how we'd use cap and trade monies going forward. And I hope we see a long-term, and I expect we'll see a long-term commitment toward developing this project. I would say, just as I conclude, Mr. Chairman, that really now putting together the narrative for what this means, what a long-term investment of these dollars mean, coupled with bond dollars for the development of this project, is really the domain of this board, the purview of this board. And I look forward to working with you very closely on that in the days ahead. And I would just say, from a broader transportation perspective, as I referenced earlier, I don't think there's much more we can do, much on the horizon that's as important or is as transformational as this project is moving forward for California. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks unless there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I just want to say that we really appreciate your leadership on this, your work with the governor on this budget and this proposal, and your leadership on transportation issues for the state in general. And we very much appreciate and are grateful for your support for high-speed rail as a transformative project for California's future. Before I ask my colleagues if they have any questions for Secretary Kelly, I would like to recognize your most recent hire,
yes,
because I think it sends a real signal about the direction of this administration's transportation priorities. But would you like to introduce Mr. Edison? Or do you
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. As I said, this project, the development of high-speed rail, the promise of what it can bring to help mobility in California is of vital importance to us, vital importance to this administration. And at the new agency, which was just established in July of last year, we want to bring in the best expertise to ensure we get this right and to ensure we integrate this project with existing rail services. So I'm very pleased to introduce you all to Chad Edison, who's sitting just below me here. Chad comes to us from the Federal Railroad Administration. He spent last few years in Washington, D.C., working on many of the issues from a national perspective that we'll be working on here in terms of incorporating our investments and targeting our investments in a way that help us build an efficient and smart passenger rail system in California. So I'm very pleased to introduce Chad, and I think over the days to come, weeks to come, you'll all get to know him very well. So Chad, welcome, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that opportunity.
Well, and welcome, Chad. And we actually did work with Mr. Edison when, in the development of our 2012 business plan, and our colleagues at the Federal Railroad Administration were helping us think through some of those issues, and Chad was great on that. So he's a terrific addition to your team. We look forward to that. Colleagues, any questions for Secretary Kelly? I want to thank you for taking time from your very busy day to come over and be with us, and it's a pleasure to be working closely with you and the department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
Thank you. Our next public speaker will be Robert Jones, followed by Michael Legal. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Board. My name is Robert Jones, and I've been before you a few times. I'm coming to you this morning. First, I need to step back and congratulate Mr. Tom Richards for his reappointment to the Board. We think that that's a very good thing for high-speed rail.
Excuse me, Mr. Jones, I'm sorry. We're
You
having
can't
a
hear
little
me?
trouble. Yeah, could you just try to speak
Okay,
directly into the
sure.
mic? Looks like we have a few challenges on the audio-visual side. Thank you, sir.
As I was saying, Mr. Richards' reappointment to the board is beneficial to the California High-Speed Rail as well as the state of California, and we congratulate you. Marvin Dean, who is an associate of mine, couldn't be here this morning. It's my understanding that the governor is down in Bakersfield, and Mr. Dean is trying to find FaceTime with him this morning. I would like to report back on the small business and DBE reporting. I believe that the message has gotten out to the prime contractors. I was down in Bakersfield last Friday, and we had 4 prime contractors that took time out of their day to come and talk about their programs with the small business and high rail. So I think the message is getting out. And I'd also like to thank Diana Gomez. She was down there as well at this informational event. As far as the reporting is concerned, I did have an opportunity to meet with Mr. Padilla a few weeks ago, and we reviewed the reporting for both January and December 1st. And I think it's important that the board understand the numbers that are within this report. And I am happy to say that there's 27.5% reported small business utilization, not utilization, but commitment, contracts, or payments. Of that 27.5% reported in December 1st, which was from, I believe, March to September, as far as the African American community, and as you remember, I came before you in October, and at that particular time, I did not know of an African American firm that had actually had a contract. Well, according to this report, there's $35 million in commitments over the last 6 months for African American firms. And I think that what is really important that most of this money is commitment, and what our next step is to make sure it becomes contract and ultimately payment. And with that, I will
Thank you, Mr.
step
Jones.
away. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Next is Michael Licola, followed by Paul Guerrero, and then Diana Lacombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Michael Licola, President of Solutions International. We represent some of the leading U.S. and international firms in the infrastructure and energy sectors. I wanted to comment today on last week's announcement of new revenue for the high-speed rail project. And while the $250 million announced in the governor's budget is not a big part of the overall project cost, it could signal a real change in the outlook for the completion of the project. So let me explain why. Many of my clients and others in the industry have been concerned, as have many in the public, about the long-term funding outlook for the high-speed rail project. While some of us in the industry have had an interest in helping finance or even invest in this important project, it was difficult to see a way to do this without some long-term public financial commitment. Last week's announcement of state funding may significantly change the outlook. While the project still remains a daunting financial challenge, private firms may now see a way to participate, particularly in the busy LA corridors. We have long felt that this busy urban corridor could benefit from private investment even during the construction stage. What was lacking was an ongoing or multi-year commitment of funding from the public side that could be used to help leverage and finance a multi-year project as large as this one. While it is still unclear whether the funding will be multi-year, I can give you some idea of what the private sector might do if it were. A multi-year commitment of funding would allow private firms to begin looking at building these projects now. They would also be able to consider financing the construction of one or more of the corridors and thus be able to start construction much sooner. In addition, depending on the corridor, they may consider adding their own equity into the financing and agree on being repaid over the long term. In short, this new source of funding for high-speed rail could, if it is a multi-year commitment, significantly change the private sector views of the project and their willingness to finance and invest and do it much sooner than originally thought. To me, that would present a real opportunity for the authority to take a new look at how and when they move forward on the next phases of the project and the role you expect from the private sector. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Licola, thank you. That's welcome and interesting news, so we appreciate that. Paul Guerrero, followed by Diana Lacombe.
I'll just grab this.
That's great.
I wanted to mention, in addition to congratulating Director Richards, I wanted to mention that in the January issue of CAHSRA magazine, which is published in Sacramento, there was a lengthy, I think, 4 or 5 page article on your chair, Jeff Morales. It was quite complimentary, and it indicated that the high-speed rail is damn lucky to have gotten him, if it, with all of his qualifications. I was really surprised when I read it. And if anybody here hasn't read it, no, I
know you didn't mean to juxtapose those two sentences the way you did.
No, I didn't mean it that way. I was surprised that that anybody is that well qualified. I mean, I was just really surprised. It was amazing, especially at his age. He's very young. I'm almost saying he's smarter than me. The other thing I wanted to talk about was at the last meeting, that handout that you have there, that red chart was put out, and I would suggest that in addition to having right-of-way contract 1, right-of-way contract 2, and that we have right-of-way contract 1, Jones Construction, so we know who got that, whether it was a small business or a large business. And then, in addition to that, on the website, if you could post when payments are made, because we're hearing from a lot of small businesses that they're not getting paid. And that means that you may be paying the prime, but he's not paying the sub. And that prime, when he gets paid, he's supposed to pay the sub within 10 days of the date he receives payment. And that's the your State Prompt Pay Act, 10262.5, the Public Contract Code. In addition, if he doesn't get paid, if that prime doesn't get paid, he's still supposed to pay the sub, regardless of whether he gets paid or not, and he can't contract that away. So one of the things that would be really great if the subs knew when that prime got paid, and they'll know that if you put it on your website. That's a small thing to do. And that's it. That's all I have to say this time. But congratulations, Jeff, and congratulations, Director Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero.
The latest thing down here.
Diana Lacombe, followed by our last speaker, Robert Allen.
Good morning, Chairman Richard, members of the board. I'm not going to comment on our CEO. It seems that we get our foot deeper into our into our mouth every time we open. But I'm Diana Lacombe, president of APAC, and today I have 2 comments to make. One is on the reports to the public should have a lot more detail than what they have. Paul mentioned some of the areas that should be covered. What I have done is I've given your secretary 2 packets of reports that are presented by Caltrans District 4, and the breakdown that they have there is really what would be excellent for the high-speed rail. I'm sure Director Sartipi would be happy to share those with you. He's in the Oakland office. Our second comment is I was very happy to see the authority's small business newsletter. So I commend you on that for getting that off the ground. But I'd like to make some recommendations for future issues. One is that this newsletter be provided monthly. The newsletter should list the authority's business council members and small business staff. 3 is that it should list all the small businesses who have or have had a contract with the authority, the amount of the contract, payments to date, and then in future issues, perhaps highlight 1 or 2 small businesses that are actually working with you. I think that would be excellent because it'll motivate a lot of small businesses as well as getting information out in terms of the commitment that you have made to small businesses on the 30%. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lacombe. And finally, Robert Allen.
This is slightly changed from November, and I realize that the high-speed rail is more oriented toward the Southland than toward the Bay Area now. And my concerns are with the Bay Area, but some of them apply to the South. And it goes basically, I've been working on the railroad, retired with 30 years. High-speed rail can be successful, but not as yours appears. Blended rail is not the answer. Its perils rule it out. Better go by better sooner go to Oakland on Amtrak's East Bay route. Said from the south goes to San Jose, then later all the Belford Way to a Bay Rail hub that's under BART. San Francisco, hey, it's BART across the bay. Better with this fresh new start. Basically, I have 4 points. That blended rail is not safe, and the high-speed rail is based upon the safe, reliable high-speed rail transfer. That's what the bond issue is for, and a blended rail is not safe, it is not reliable. That the first phase of this could very well be from the Southland up to San Jose with cross-platform transfers to Caltrain and to the Capital Corridor. No need to run the high-speed rail all the way up, modify Caltrain for that. Another is that there's on the back of the thing I gave you, there's a map, a sketch map, Google map, where I showed where a Trans-Bay hub station would be, which would be suitable for BART, and BART trains run about every 4 minutes across the bay. It takes between 6 and 10 minutes to reach all 4 of the downtown San Francisco stations. It's a tremendous, it's really close. It's a lot closer than the San Francisco rail hub at this point, would be much closer than the San Francisco airport, which is about almost half an hour away. And I sure urge that you work with BART on getting a Trans-Bay hub, and that you go to upgrade the Mulford route of the Union Pacific from San Jose through Santa Clara and up to Oakland.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And keep working on that presentation approach that's unique, so we appreciate that. Thank you very much. Right. That completes our public comments. However, I want to bring one matter up here. I've noticed that I have just received an email, and all the other board members have received an email from a representative of CARD purporting to make comments on an agenda item. It's sent to my personal email. It's sent to the personal emails of members of this board. I think that's entirely inappropriate. I'm not going to read this email because I don't think that is a proper way to put comments in front of this board. We have been very, very open to public comments to afford members of the public ample opportunity to come before this board and comment to us, or to send letters that can be docketed and made part of the public record. I have to comment that I think it's rather ironic that an organization that persists in raising questions about our transparency would choose a means of communication that is not transparent to the rest of the public. If they or any other member of the public has issues that they want to bring before this board, they need to be brought before this board in a proper way. And I'm going to ask our general counsel to take a look at this and to communicate with that organization, ask them to please stop sending emails to members directly in the middle of a board meeting. They have a perfect opportunity, and they have afforded themselves of it in the past, to come before this board in public and make whatever statements they wish to make. but private emails to board members in the middle of a board meeting is simply not a proper means of communication. So I just wanted to make that point, and I'm going to delete this email. It's not going to be part of the public record, and they have the opportunity, if they choose to communicate with us in a more appropriate way. With that, I'm going to turn to our board minutes and ask for a motion on the approval of the board minutes. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Richards.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett.
Yes.
Mr. Umberg.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi. Ms. Shank.
Yes.
Ms. Perez Estelano.
Yes.
Mr. Henning. Chairman Richard.
Yes. Before we turn to our next item, Mr. Florenz, I just had one other thing that I wanted to turn to our CEO and ask for him to discuss for a moment before we get to the rest of our regular agenda matter. We heard from Secretary Kelly this morning about the governor's budget proposal with respect to cap and trade revenues and their appropriate use for the construction of the high-speed rail system. And I'd like to turn to our CEO, Mr. Morales, and ask him to add any additional comments that he has on that. And also, I know there was some commentary yesterday from the Legislative Analyst's Office about the appropriateness of these funds, and I think it informs the public debate. If, Jeff, you could just take a few minutes and walk us through this.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Secretary Kelly noted, the governor has proposed cap and trade funding for high-speed rail in the current budget with an ongoing commitment. It's important to note that this really is the implementation of a strategy that has been laid out for better than half a decade. Going back to the passage of AB 32, the Air Resources Board.
Does this one work? They don't seem to be very powerful.
All right, that's better. Okay. The proposal for the use of cap and trade funds goes back to the passage of AB 32 and the Air Resources Board's first scoping plan, which was released in December of 2008, which specified that high-speed rail was a priority investment for cap and trade to help the state not only reach the short-term goals but maintain the greenhouse gas reduction goals over the long run. I think it's best for ARB, for Secretary Kelly, the Department of Finance, to speak to kind of the big picture questions of eligibility which have been raised, and I will say they've made it very clear that they do not agree with the LAO position there. But what I want to focus on are two other questions which were raised by the LAO, which I think need to be corrected, some factual errors, essentially, and based on two premises. One, that there will be net emissions of greenhouse gases during our construction program, and secondly, that we would not see benefits accruing before 2020. And that's we need to correct both of those. One, we have adopted, this board has pushed us to adopt a proposal and a policy of being net zero emissions throughout the construction of this program. And we have put into place the steps to do that, which include some very aggressive steps requiring our contractors, for instance, to use the very latest Tier 4 equipment, EPA Tier 4 equipment. We're going to have aggressive mitigation programs, which range everything from planting several thousand trees in the Central Valley to address greenhouse gas, to replacing diesel pumps on water pumps in the Central Valley area as part of our overall mitigation program. So we will be net zero emissions during construction, which is a very significant step. Secondly, and I think we've got, if we can get on, we might be able to get on the screen here. In terms of the reductions, and the short-term reductions, I just want to talk about those quickly again, because these are things that will happen by 2020, which is the focal point for many people with the cap and trade program. First, we need to note the Caltrain electrification program is going forward as part of the high-speed rail program. That will be up and running by 2019, and that will produce an estimated 18,000 tons of reduction of CO2 a year once it's up and running. Very important. We are also investing as part of this program in other major improvements in transit programs throughout the state through the connectivity funds as well as the bookend funding. In our contract with our design builder, we have required them to recycle all concrete and steel, a very aggressive approach which diverts those wastes from landfills, has significant savings. Again, we're requiring them to use the latest technologies on fuels. We'll be implementing a number of different measures up and down the valley, all of which will help us not only be net zero, but in fact will produce reductions by 2020 in this. On the next, over the long run, it's also important to note that the purpose of AB 32, again, is not just to get to a target in 2020, but to get there and stay there. And ARB has long noticed, and AB 32, in fact, spoke to that issue, saying that it is very important to ensure that we maintain reductions and continue to reduce in the face of growing population beyond 2020 out to at least 2050. ARB has consistently supported high-speed rail as a tool for doing that, working in conjunction with local transit and, as it has said, acting as a catalyst for transit-oriented development and more sustainable development throughout the state. So I just want to make sure we're clear on the record that I think the broad, big picture issue of eligibility of high-speed rail is something that has been addressed very clearly in statute and by the Air Resources Board. And then the specific questions of the near-term benefits, we can also provide very clear answers and show those benefits. And so we're very pleased with the governor's proposal and recognize we are part of a balanced program going forward, and look forward to not only building our system, but contributing to the reduction of greenhouse gases in California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morales. Appreciate your clarifications on that. Members of the board, do you have any questions for our CEO on those points? I just want to commend you for your leadership, and you and the staff, and in the way that you're building this project. So thank you. We'll turn back to the regular order. Mr. Falens, item 3.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and board members. Item 3 is a request for the board to approve delegations of authority to the Chief Executive Officer. Over the years, there's been a number of resolutions passed by this board delegating authority to the CEO. And the attempt here is to consolidate in one place those authorities, and also to address some recent legislation that took effect on January 1st, 2014. And that legislation is in the area of real property and utilities. And so I included some, for your consideration, some delegations that relate to those particular legislative acts. If you turn to the delegation of authority document itself, I just want to point out some of the changes, because I mentioned this is a consolidation, but some of the changes that I've included here. One is that the CEO can, at his or her discretion, delegate some of these authorities to staff. And in the past, it had just mentioned that the delegation can go to staff, but I've included appropriate qualified authority staff so that there's a clear direction from the board that the CEO has the responsibility to think through and measure that the delegations from him or her down are appropriate. In addition, in the fiscal area, I provided more clarification on the role of the board in the fiscal matters, which is that the CEO or the Chief Executive Officer or Chief Financial Officer will present the budget to the board for review, input, and acceptance, and that would be as frequently as the CEO would determine that to be needed. Usually that's once a year. There's a budget that goes to the Department of Finance from the High-Speed Rail Authority. I also, if you look to the legal portion, to create what I believe to be more consistency in the types of delegations that you've given to the CEO in the past, I've increased the amount of litigation settlement authority to $5 million to the CEO, and that matches the similar $5 million amount in the procurement and agreement area. And then finally, if you look at the real property section in these delegations, this just tracks the recent legislation that I mentioned, and I tied those to the particular public utility code sections that is that new legislation. I'm happy to take any questions or hear any concerns or suggestions you might have.
All right. Thank you very much. Why don't we just pass this down? It's probably faster.
I got it. Yeah, I think I have it. Thank you, Mr. Filens. Just in the interest of having the record more fulsome, should be noted that you spent time individually with each board member so that we went through this quite thoroughly, and some of these changes are a result of those discussions, and so thank you for making those changes and clarifications. As I had said to you when we talked, I'd like to have considered by the CEO and staff some reporting back mechanism so that whether annually or semi-annually we get a written report on some of these larger items, obviously not the small 1,000, 2,000, and I don't really have my arms around what would be the right number, but some of what we've delegated is fairly significant. And I, for one, would like to know on some reasonable basis feedback as to what actions have been taken under the authority of this delegation. So, Jeff, if you would think about that and maybe get back to us on what might be a reasonable, not too burdensome reporting requirement.
Thank you, Director Schenk. Other questions? Director Rossi. I'd just like the record to note that the Marine has just turned to the Navy guy for technical assistance.
Usually do. As concerns the resolution, I don't think it makes sense to ratify actions without knowing what those actions are. So I would just suggest that we approve this amendment without a ratification of actions that have been taken, unless there are some actions that were taken that you're aware of that were in violation of the delegation, and we should know about those before we ratify them.
No, I'm not aware of any violations of
I think, let me just comment that the purpose of this, as I understood it, was simply that, and I'll just say it, that in some of the litigation that's been filed against us, people have raised certain questions, and so the notion here was to essentially just clear all that out. And I think in particular it goes to the issue of the CP1 contract issuance, and so that was the reason. I don't think there was ever any question of the board's authority on that, but it was brought into question in the litigation, and so that was why Mr. Filens included it here. So that was the purpose for it, and I don't know that there's any other action beyond that. But I think what our counsel was doing was just, in a matter of judicial efficiency, just trying to make sure that if anybody wanted to bring those claims, that we just foreclose them. Tom, do you want to?
That's accurate, Mr. Chairman.
The only problem with that, Mr. Chairman, is that I don't think it closes it, because approving something you're not aware of what it is you're approving doesn't hold well in any place. So if that's what we're approving, then I'd like it if that's what we're ratifying, then I'd like it to be clear that that's what we're ratifying.
All right.
What exactly it is we're ratifying.
Then I'm going to suggest that we put this over for 1 month, and we address those issues and bring it back to the board at that point.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll just take it off calendar. Let's move on to the next item, which is the extension of the contract with Caltrans for legal services for time only.
Yes, we have an existing contract for legal services with Caltrans, and this is just asking the board for authority to extend that contract for an additional 2-year period. You had previously approved it for $7.3 million. The amount remains the same. These services will be needed for a longer period of time, but the amount to be spent is remaining the same. So the staff has to come back to the board for certain contract extensions in money and time, and so this is just asking for authority to extend it out to the end of the fiscal year of 2016.
Okay, questions for Mr. Flens? Okay, it's been moved by Director Hartnett, seconded by Director Schenk. Secretary, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg? Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Schenk?
Yes.
Ms. Pettis Estelano?
Yes.
Mr. Henning? Chairman Richard?
Yes. Okay. And then our final item is the award of the contract for Lazy K Ranch Permit Phase 1 Biological Resources Mitigation Project. Mr. McLaughlin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. I wanted to bring this item to you today. It's on our habitat conservation. It's a component of our sustainability program. We came before you last November for approval of delegation of authority to CEO Jeff Morales for the Lazy K contract. And since that time, through our negotiations with the contractor, Beaumont Consulting, we found that we'd like to have the opportunity to have additional, or we may need additional agreements within that authority to allow us to proceed in a quicker manner for the preservation of construction package 1. And so one portion that we're really looking at today is for third-party easement holders. So we would like to have the ability to provide other agreements and work directly with them to preserve the schedule that we have and work directly with the third-party agreements for conservation easements. So simply that's the matter before you today to allow, again, other agreements within that first approval you provided in November.
Okay.
Just to reinforce, again, this is in no way changing the scope of what the board approved. It's simply allowing for us to contract with more than one party to implement the preservation plan.
Right. Okay. And it was a very impressive program that was presented to us at the last meeting. So any questions for Mr. McLaughlin? Motion? Okay. All right. It was moved by Director Hartnett and seconded by Director Rossi. The Secretary, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Schenk?
Yes.
Ms. Pettis Estelano?
Yes.
Mr. Henning? Chairman Richard?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes.
I might direct your attention back to, and board members back to item number 3. I have a suggestion.
All right.
That would be that you remove the ratification paragraph within that, within the resolution, and that you move ahead with the passing of the delegations. And the reason I bring this up is because
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
All right. So back on item 3, it's been moved and seconded, been moved by Director Rossi, seconded by Director Hartnett, that the resolution go forward with the absence of the ratification provisions. Without comment, did you want to comment? Without comment, Secretary, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg? Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Schenk?
Yes.
Ms. Pettis Estelano?
Yes.
Mr. Henning? Chairman Richard?
Yes. Okay, that completes the agenda before us. This board will now return to closed session, and then we'll report back after that time. So we stand in recess in closed session. Thank you. Okay, I'm returning from the closed session. We have no items to report from the closed session, but the closed session has been continued from today until Wednesday, January 22nd at 2 p.m. Here in Sacramento. Thank you, and we'll be adjourned.
I know. I like that little twist at the end.